Hey there guys, welcome back, Ricky here. Alright, so a lot of folks have been asking me about knife sharpening recently. Now I figured with my channel doing lots of Japanese knife reviews, it would be appropriate to do a video, a tutorial on how to sharpen a Gyuto knife. And today we are sharpening this knife right here. It's a Matsumoto KS. It's a Gyuto profile. It really comes down to about two techniques that I use. There's the push and pull technique and what we call the crescent or full stroke technique. And so for this Matsumoto KS, being that it's a very straight profile, we're going to use the push and pull technique. On a knife such as the Kramer or some of the other knives that we have, which have a very pronounced belly, we'll use the crescent profile. Next is the grip. Now a lot of people don't realize this, but depending on which side of the knife you're sharpening, your grip will actually change slightly. So the very first thing is we're going to move our middle finger up to the choil of the knife or the neck of the knife. So once your middle finger is planted on the choil, you bring your thumb over to the cutting edge. You want to bring your thumb as close to the cutting edge as possible, but not putting your thumb on the cutting edge. And lots of folks actually miss this part of the sharpening process because without having your thumb on the heel, you actually will have a very dull heel when you're done with sharpening. Once your thumb is planted, you want to wrap your index finger over to the spine. By keeping your wrist and fingers relaxed, you'll have the most control of the knife during sharpening. Now we are ready to sharpen, but wait a minute, you're asking, what is the proper sharpening angle? Now if you guys want my clear answer on sharpening angles, watch this video that I will leave linked in the video description or right here on the card somewhere. It basically does a pretty fair comparison of different sharpening angles and why you shouldn't sharpen at 10 degrees versus 20 degrees. And I don't want to get into details in this video, but you can watch that video. It'll give you a pretty clear explanation of how sharpening angles work and what my thoughts are and what is the best sharpening angle. For me, it's about 15 or 17 degrees, but I'm going to show you guys how to find the factory angle. All you have to do is get the knife onto the stone. You start at roughly a 20-degree angle and you drag the knife at a really slow pace towards the bottom of the stone, and you actually will lean the spine very, very slowly towards the stone. And once the knife slips, that's when you actually know that you've hit a shoulder of the knife and you actually want to back off just a degree or so. That's actually the sharpening angle from the factory. You're going by feel as opposed to trying to predetermine an angle, and by not trying to change the angle at which you're sharpening, you actually will get an edge a lot faster, and you actually will find a burr a lot faster as well. It is always a good habit to form a sharpening process. So for me, that process is going from tip to heel. And so for me, whenever I go from tip to heel, that is what I call one pass. Now with the free hand, you want to place your fingers as close to the cutting edge as possible without actually getting on the cutting edge. I typically like to keep it about a half an inch from the cutting edge. That way I actually have enough adequate pressure on the cutting edge. And starting at the tip, I simply go in a few strokes. After 3 or 4 strokes, I simply remove the knife about an inch or so, and I walk my fingers down the knife. And the reason you walk your fingers down as you're sharpening is that you want your fingers over the middle of the stone. If you're sharpening close to the center or the heel of your knife and you have your fingers on the knife's tip and you're pressing down, the knife will actually grind against the corners of the stone, which ruins your cutting edge, and you have to start the process all over again. Lots of people who are new to sharpening will place their freehand fingers on the spine, and that really can throw your balance completely off. So I don't recommend that. If you really want to learn how to walk your fingers down the knife, simply walk your fingers up and down the knife with the knife on the stone. That gives you a little bit of muscle memory, and that's something that you can do to kind of ease yourself into the sharpening process. The other thing you can do is actually simply take your knife and fingers off the stone. You place the knife down, place your fingers on the knife, and then start the sharpening process there. That way you aren't going to risk cutting yourself very easily, and it actually will give you much more confidence in the long run. So as the name of the technique suggests, this is pushing and pulling. You literally are putting the knife onto the cutting stone and you're pushing up and pulling towards you. Now in terms of applying pressure, here's the other debate that you'll always hear about, is when to apply pressure. I personally always apply pressure in the edge trailing stroke, meaning I only apply pressure when the edge is being trailed and the cutting edge is pointing towards me. I apply when I push up or away from me. When it's time to sharpen the left side of the knife, the cutting edge is facing away from me. I apply when I pull towards me. So now how do you know when you've sharpened the right side of the knife enough? Well, you have to find the burr, and the way to find the burr is you simply run horizontally from the spine to the cutting edge of the knife. Very slowly. Imagine yourself running your fingers over a strand of hair on a glass table. That is essentially what a burr should feel like. It should feel very fine. It should not be very aggressive. And if you have that developed from the tip to the heel of the knife, you are ready to move on. So now it's time to sharpen the other side of the knife. Well, your grip now has to be adjusted. So the technique that I use to find the grip for the other side of the knife is I first place my index finger on the heel of the knife first. Once I have that, I simply wrap my pinky, ring, and middle finger first, and then gently put my thumb on the spine of the knife. Now by doing it that way, you will have a really nice secure grip. Now to find the factory sharpening angle, you do the exact same thing as the other side. You take any section of the knife, put it onto the stone at roughly 20 degrees or so and drag it towards you and lean the spine of the knife down. The moment you feel a slip, you back off. That's your sharpening angle. And you start the process all over again. Now since we're sharpening the left side of the knife, the burr will appear on the right side of the knife. You simply run your fingers from the spine to the cutting edge in a very gentle, slow motion. If you can detect that burr from the heel to the tip of the knife, you're good to go. Now there are many methods you can use to deburr a knife. You can use a cork from a wine bottle. If I'm using a piece of wood, I use the end grain side of my strop. That actually does pretty well. I'm using a spare piece of leather from a previous project that's laying around. It's very thick. It's about 4 millimeters or 5 millimeters thick. This is an extremely thick piece of leather, so I'm not afraid the knife will actually cut through it. It removes the burr very cleanly from the knife. There's also deburring on the stone. And essentially what you do is you go back to the stone and do the exact same sharpening technique as before, but very short. So instead of doing 4 to 5 strokes per section, you do 1 to 2 strokes per section. And I'll do 1 or 2 passes on each side, and I'll go back and forth, and then ending with a really quick 1 or 2 passes for the entire length of the knife. By doing it that way, most likely your burr will be gone and removed off the knife completely. And for those who want to go into a 5,000, 6,000 or higher polishing stone, you simply repeat the process that I'm showing you now on your polishing stone. You simply find the same angle at which you sharpen your knife at, and you do single strokes from tip to heel. So the key is going very light strokes and go very evenly smooth strokes, and you simply go back and forth on each side of the knife, repeating maybe 10 pairs or 20 pairs of pulls. That is stropping on the whetstone. These are strops that I've made and used for myself in the studio. For those who are interested, I will leave a link in the video description. You can find these strops at my e-store. You're basically doing exactly what the stone is doing, but leathers tend to kind of pull off more micro materials from the cutting edge a little bit better than a whetstone could. And so that's really the main benefit of going to a leather strop. You definitely don't have to. And so this strop here is loaded with 9,000 grit compound. I personally like to go about 10 strokes per side. That to me is usually sufficient. If you want to go a little bit longer, that's okay as well. Whether you've done those last 20 pulls on your sharpening whetstone, a polishing whetstone, or a leather strop, you're done. So for pure entertainment, I want to see how sharp this knife got. Now according to Edge On Up, anything below 200 is considered razor sharp. So at 145, the amount of force it took in grams to cut this filament is very good. So that is actually just as good as a factory sharpened edge that the KSs are sharpened at. So I'm very personally satisfied that I can achieve this edge on a single whetstone and leather strop. Now if you want to see tutorials on other knife shapes such as the Kramer chef knives, Yanagibas, the Dragon Fusion Nakuri, or even something as like the Middleton chef's knives. Now with the exception of the Yanagiba and the Dragon Nakuri, all those other knives are chef's knives, but they have very non-traditional profiles. And so if you guys want to see tutorials on those, give the video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what other knives you guys want to see, and I'll do my best to put those videos together for you. And one last thing, it's always a good idea to wash your knife after a sharpening session. Now even if you didn't use compound, it's a good habit to get into. This is especially important for those who actually use strop and compound, because sometimes you may have something that is slightly not kosher to eat, so you definitely want to avoid that. Wash it with soap and water, you should be good to go. I will leave a link to all the items used in today's video in the video description so you can check them out on your own time. And for those who want to see daily and weekly updates of my life and channel, at the very bottom of the video description there are social media links. Well, thank you for being here, and I'll catch you in the next video. This is what one shoe looks like. Check that out. See how many knives? I don't know how many knives there are in like that. Right there is probably a couple thousand knives just in that section alone. Look at this. Look at this. Yaxel Super Ghost. These things are like $200, $300. Look how many there are here. There's like 3 or 4 dozen of them just sitting right here. Artisan SG2 box. Artisan SG2 box. So right there's probably 100, there's probably at least 100 the Miyabi Artisans right there.